All right. Those online, can you hear us?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to the September meeting for Central Park United Neighbors. So I'll get rid of that, I think, on my screen. Sorry, guys. So tonight's meeting, now it's not actually moving the slide deck. Okay, there we go. So tonight's meeting is just a planning meeting, primarily for the Central Park United Neighbors Board. Our agenda is a little bit different. When I had asked folks for suggestions on what would make this a successful planning or board retreat meeting, the overarching themes were kind of icebreakers and getting to know each other as Central Park residents and board members. And then also mission clarity was a second kind of topic that came up several times in folks' feedback, and then action planning was the kind of other major kind of goal that folks wanted to see come out of this meeting. So the agenda we put together reflects that. So we will actually start with icebreakers, getting to know each other. I realized I didn't bring name tags, but I think that we do actually need to introduce ourselves to each other again, because we're usually over Zoom or in person. Just it's good to reintroduce ourselves. After the icebreakers, we'll do just a brief overview of what registered neighborhood organizations are and are not. I'll do an overview of that, and then we'll have a report out from the board members who attended the INC's Neighborhood Organizing 101 event back in June. And then we'll have two board discussions. The first one will be just kind of revisiting our mission statement, looking at what areas of emphasis in that mission statement speak to us, and also a little norm setting in how we communicate with each other, or any other kind of topics on how we interact with one another that folks want to bring up. The other part of that is I will have just a little bit of information on the bylaws. It's a brief document. I only am highlighting stuff that is relevant to this discussion, but that will also be part of it. The second board discussion will be actually just hopefully a fairly open-ended sharing of each person's idea of what the state of the neighborhood is, and some action planning for us as a board as a whole, but also for our committees. And then at the very end, we'll have 5 minutes just for events and meeting look-aheads, and a wrap up of the meeting. So Carol, I think you're facilitating the icebreakers.
Sure, why not? You all got the questions, and then you were to select a couple, and we have about a half an hour. We'll probably have a little time if you want to expand, or if somebody has a burning question based on what you say, that is provocative or not, or they want some clarification, what have you. So Kristen, I'm going to start with you. Okay?
Sure.
So what two questions did you decide upon, and what are your responses to that?
So the unique hobby or skill might surprise you. I just took up road cycling, and I think I bought a bike in October, started really riding it in January, and put 1,100 miles on the bike, never having done this before. We got this crazy harebrained idea to do this thing called RAGBRAI, which is the Register's annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. And you actually ride your bike or any wheeled vehicle across Iowa, like from one side to the entire other side of the state. And come to find out that every state has a ride like this now. This was the first. So we did that in July, my husband and I, and it was super fun. And now I'm addicted to biking. So that was really fun. And then I am not from Denver originally, so I can't claim to be a native, but I did create one. So I feel like that's a net, net. I grew up in half my childhood in California, half my childhood in Virginia, but I'm also from a government family. So my mother worked for the CIA, and my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin, and my best friend's mom, like everybody in the Metro DC area in Northern Virginia worked for some government entity or another. And that took me to the Philippines for several years and back to Virginia and so forth. So I've traveled to 60 countries. So if you ever want to help planning a trip, possible, I've been there. And I'm always planning another trip. So it's a pretty about me.
Did that prompt the biking? Is that, do you think that's connected or?
Actually, yeah, that's the next like bingo card kind of thing is okay definitely on a future trip, maybe the next one, we want to incorporate travel, culture and biking. So we'll,
Nice.
ride bikes in Patagonia or something. So,
Well, I was gonna ask Jeff. No, he's left. Tag him. Tricia.
Where was I in 2004? I was in Austin. With my husband and I had just moved from San Diego to Austin. And he was getting his master's there. And I was working for Bank of America at the time. And we loved Austin, but Texas is a special breed of people. I grew up here. I grew up in Pueblo. And so I had left for 15 years and then had come back after college. And we wanted to come back to Denver. We had a lot of friends that were here, mutual friends that were here. So I integrated both of those questions together.
Okay, all right. And I didn't know you had lived in San Diego.
For 10 years. My husband's from there.
Yeah.
My in-laws actually
Yeah.
just left and went to Bend, Oregon. They had been there for 55 years. Yeah, that was their driving force to leave. They couldn't handle the traffic and all of it anymore. So they went to Bend. But we still love it there. We had a house there for a long time and then we sold it. So we still love it. It's beautiful. My kids love the bay. They dig it. Yeah, they love it. Even when they were little kids, we used to take them all the time and we'd stay inside the bay so that they could just run around and do whatever. They still love it. So
You go back?
we do. Yeah, we still very much go back a lot.
Are your kids bitter that you moved out of the UC network in-state?
Not really,
Tuition?
because
Mine is.
it's not, I don't know that I would send him there. Like San Diego State is too far from the beach, right? And then you just have UC San Diego. Well, it is. It's not real.
Like someone who's in California.
It's not really a beach town. It's like CSU, but essentially. And then the UC system it's right on the beach, but who actually can afford that? And it's not really that fun either. That's the other part about UC. It's not it's not really that fun. It's super boring. So, well, it's right smack dab in the middle of La Jolla. So it's like, you can't really be a college kid in La Jolla. It's a little bit different. Like,
Well, I teach college, so in 2004, I was working at an archaeology site in Spain with my husband. And because I'm an archaeologist, my husband is an anthropologist who works with me on archaeology sites. And so we were there over summer in very northern Spain, very close to the ocean or the channel. And let's see, a book that influenced me is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. Isn't that a great book? Yeah. I think about it all the time, actually. There's like little snippets in it about King Arthur and his training that are near and dear to my heart.
Well, it's also about how different communities form themselves. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
The
no, it's
reasons
very-
behind it. Yeah. So it's a good book. I am.
Say what the book is again, sorry.
The Once and Future King. It's about King Arthur. It's by T.H. White, and it's about King Arthur and basically his childhood. And yeah, it's a good book. And unique hobbies. My daughter and I just started Irish dancing. So yeah, it's been really fun actually.
I can't wait to watch her demo. That'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
Good for you.
To do it together is really fun.
we do it together. Yeah, it's been fun. We performed once, and she she loves being on stage, but then she gets really shy. So I think being on stage with me for a little bit will just introduce her to
For those of you who don't know, she has a first grader.
ever. Word. Yeah, my husband and I, well, I was born and raised Colorado. My daughter is born and raised in Colorado. Kaylee's a transplant because he moved here when he was 2. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, we're from here.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
Wanna go?
Sure. I'll start with a boring fact about me because it's fairly boring. I have a very high threshold for boring tasks.
Wow.
And it's like, I like spreadsheets. I like really like public records research. I spend a lot of time looking at like 990 tax filings for nonprofits because I'm nosy.
Wow.
And so that is generally, I realize that I have like attention issues, so the fact that I have a high threshold for boring and repetitive tasks is partly because it is making order out of chaos. And so I just find a lot of comfort in that structure. So that's the boring fact about me. Let's see. I think a lot of us are really like talking about what we were doing in 2004, so since it was 20 years ago. My life was completely different. I lived outside of Boston, or I lived in the Boston area. I had started my first publishing job, and my then boyfriend, now husband, had moved across the state for a grad school program. That was just for 2 years. And so I would spend every other weekend, I didn't have a car. I relied entirely on public transportation. So every other weekend, I would ride the Greyhound bus 2.5 to 3 hours to Northampton. And just like read books, people watched, had very memorable and random conversations with folks on the Greyhound bus, like for 2 years, starting in 2004. And yeah, it was kind of just this wonderful, very quiet time in my life that is, very, very different from like now being like the parent of 2 kids. And the direction that things go in. Yeah. So anyway, those are my
I like knowing if you have children or if
Oh.
about just a little background, because I just think I have such respect right now for parents. I'm a parent, but I'm an adult. So I just appreciate first grade and high school.
I was gonna say, we've got
All of
other
that
parents
going
here,
on.
too.
We're a blended family. We've got second marriage. I have all high schoolers at Northfield, freshman stepdaughter, sophomore daughter, and oh gosh, no, it's a new year. Sorry, sophomore stepdaughter, junior daughter, and senior stepson. Keeps us busy.
So,
I have 3 boys, a sophomore, 8th grader, and 5th grader.
and you're here standing, your eyes are open.
I am barely standing right now.
So no, I appreciate, this is part of why I appreciate everybody's participation. For those who can make it.
Yeah, yeah. The book or writer in terms of positive personal growth and professional, as it turns out, when I really started to think about this, was the Nancy Drew series. When I was about 11, my world felt really small. In terms of, I was raised in Ohio primarily in a very middle class white family, and my parents were together their whole lives. And I lived in a community that was a little bit about, we found out we're related. Not biologically, but in some other personal experiences, right? Right? So he knows where Worthington, Ohio is. So thank you very much. But Nancy Drew was just this anomaly for me. I had become a reader through comic books. That's how I got hooked on reading, was through comic books. But the Nancy Drew series, here's a girl, a woman who has no mom. Her father raises her along with a housekeeper, and her buddies are, I think, cousins. George, which always fascinated me, a girl named George, and Bess, who is the complete opposite of George, and physically and emotionally and all that. And they go and they solve mysteries, you know, they put themselves in danger. And I didn't know you could do that kind of thing. I mean, it was just, it was profound for me. And then kind of, so this personal, this whole other sort of, oh, there's this other world out there. And then thinking about it professionally, that there were other options. And I have told my students this in the past. When I was in high school, it was like there were 5 careers to be considered, and they weren't really careers because I was supposed to get married. And that was the only way I was going to ever afford a house or any kind of independence in my life. So that just stuck with me. And I have Nancy Drew books in my living room, my bookshelf. The other thing is I'm not from here. I'm outside of Denver, and I've counted this up before, but I've lived in 15 different cities or towns in my life. And it started when I was about 3, the move. And so coming here, we came here from San Diego, Tricia.
Oh, really?
San Diego for about 19 years.
Which county?
I was in Kensington and in San Diego.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I had a house in North Park Hill. Yeah, North Park, sorry.
North Park,
Hill.
for neighbors.
North Park.
Okay,
Yeah.
just now another neighbor. But I never felt like San Diego was where I was from. And so coming here was from San Diego, but I had I got to make the choice with this move. And I had very few choices about all the moves that I've made through my life, starting with my dad, because we always for his job. And there were no questions asked. Just like he'd come home and he'd say, "We're going to Omaha." And that was like, okay, when do we have to start packing? So this was my choice, and we came here for a lot of different reasons. And one of them was because I have a friend that's been a friend for about 40 years, and she's here, and her family was here. And so we sort of had a built-in whatever folks that we could latch onto and be with, and who ended up taking good care of us and introducing us to a lot of people. So yeah, and I've had probably double or maybe 30, 35 different houses or apartments that I've lived in my life too. So yeah, but I'm not planning. I mean, Denver's probably it. It was nice to have a choice.
Shows well.
So I have two kids. I have 2 daughters, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And then for my icebreaker questions, the book that I thought influenced my professional growth and personal growth too would be Mindset by Carol Dweck, which in terms of how I think it shifted my thinking from things that I used to only embrace things I was naturally good at. And now I look at things a bit different, and it's helped me grow in a number of ways. And then a skill that might surprise you all is that I'm technically a professional poker player. I went to the World Series of Poker in 2016, and I won a small sum of money there. So I'm designated as a professional, although I just play recreationally now and not as much as I'd like. But yeah, and also I'm gonna sneak a third one in because everyone's talking about 2004. I was at Ohio State. I was very active with the College Democrats, and through the John Kerry campaign, I met a lot of prominent people, people who were on the trail with him. Bruce Springsteen, Rashida Jones, Claire Danes. There's a number of others I'm not listing now, but yeah, I wanted to sneak that in because 04 was a
Wow.
unfortunately Kerry. Yeah, I know, right? And Ohio couldn't deliver either.
I'm Matt Blackburn. And in 2004, I was here in Denver. I had just started my accounting career at Ernst & Young. So I was working there. And I had a 8-year-old daughter at the time, who's now almost 28, Piper. And I was divorced from her mom and had just been getting to know my now wife, Michelle. The two of us met at CU Denver, getting our master's degrees in accounting. And so it was fun, fun year, 2004. Lots of new stuff. And I lived in Northwest Denver at the time. So, and now I have a second daughter who's 14 and is a freshman at East High School. And so my wife and I 14 years after my first daughter was born, had our second daughter, so we have a bit of an age gap there, but we're a tight-knit group, so those kids get along. And then my favorite hidden gem in Central Park would be the Sand Creek Greenway. And I recently joined the board of the Sand Creek Greenway to help specifically with my background's in accounting. So I'm helping out the executive director there with their accounting and financial matters. And I just think it's a great spot. It's, sometimes gets a bad rap, and sometimes, there are parts of it that are unwelcoming, I'll just say, put it that way. But it's also, a natural area that runs, from Denver all the way through Commerce City and Aurora. I think most of us are probably somewhat familiar with it, but there's murals along the path, right along the section downstream from where Westerly Creek flows into Sand Creek. And there's a trailhead up there which you can access from Havana Street and Smith Road. And if you go west on Smith, you'll get to that Greenway trailhead. So I invite everybody to check it out again for the first time.
I've ridden it many times.
Yeah,
I love it. I love
yeah,
it.
it's great for
Like
biking.
next to Colgate, Tollgate, Front Range.
You can go a long way with dealing with traffic, so it's nice.
Hi, I'm David Cooper. In 2004, I was in high school. I was finishing my junior year and starting my senior year of high school in Western Nebraska. So it's so funny because people are always like, oh, I've been to Nebraska, I've been to Omaha. And I was like, I grew up about 7.5 hours from Omaha. So like Denver was the closest city. It was only 3 hours. So that's also why I'm here too, is just because I was like, it was a city that was I was drawn to, and my family's really easy to get to. And then some of my favorite spots, they're not particularly hidden, but some of my favorite spots in Central Park are Cuba, Posetti Gelato Place, the San Gary Library, Rosso Pomodoro, the new pizza place in the town center. It's great.
Is that new?
It's brand new. Yeah.
I hadn't heard of it before.
It's great.
Okay.
The Central Park Rec Center, D-Bar, they have an amazing like affogato with like the ice cream and it's so good.
Where is
And-
it? I looked for it.
It's in the town center. It's like, yeah, it's like basically the first, if you turn on to 29th from Quebec, it's like the first one.
Einstein's.
Yeah,
Yeah, but like by the fountain?
No.
No,
Like
no,
that.
further
closer to Quebec,
Oh, okay,
like right by Quebec, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
by the liquor store.
okay, okay, that one got, I know where that is.
And then the Arsenal. I love just going on the wildlife drive. So it's like usually if I have family or friends visiting, who aren't particularly hikers, I'm not particularly a hiker, but I was like, it's such a beautiful like landscape and being able to see downtown. And so I usually take them on the wildlife drive. So, yes.
And a great place to watch the sunset is Rattlesnake Hill, if you've been up there. So great place to ride too. But yeah, you can drive to it. It's not part of the wildlife drive, so you can easily get in and out.
Yeah.
And it's a hill. No rattlesnakes that I've seen. And you just have 360 views all the way around. So you can see the buffalo from up there. See the mountains, beautiful.
Cool. Thank you.
Somebody just told me we taught them, to drive at the Arsenal.
It's full of people right now who have permits.
And I never thought of that before.
Because it's all one way.
I was gonna say that.
And there's like,
These,
there's no
yeah.
traffic and you can just keep going around and around. It's quite nice, actually. I'm like, okay, this is good. Like, we just keep going around and around and around.
That's where we
It
would
is.
take my daughter to take a nap when she was like,
Yeah.
what?
Right. We used to do that in the wintertime with my little one, but like now it's full of teenagers that are like, they can only go one way though.
But they-
Oh, yes, right.
There's somebody while I'm bike riding, so.
Yeah, you should probably look over your shoulder a little bit, make sure they're all very like,
Bono,
those I haven't met, I think I've met everybody, it's a new board member. I have a second grader. And in 2004, I was my freshman, sophomore year of college, CU Boulder. And I thought I could still be a doctor then and realized that I'm not very good at studying. So, and I'm from Denver, and I would say what brought me back is my husband and our family moved in 2018 to New Jersey for a few years. And he has family in New York, so it was kind of nice because we could see them and connect with them more. And my best friend was in DC, so it was kind of fun taking the train and, but then we rode out the pandemic there and really decided New Jersey was not the place for us. And so, before the pandemic, we really wanted to live abroad. We had a pretty solid option for that, but, I don't know, it just felt so far, literally and emotionally with, the idea like the airports could get shut down again and we couldn't get home. So we ended up moving to California, where my husband took another job. And shortly after we landed there, he found out that he could go remote. And so worked on, all right, well, how are we getting back to Denver? So we kind of did a big loop and came back. All of my family's here, and both sides of my family are from the San Luis Valley. And so we've been here for hundreds of years. We've always been here. So in so many ways, I think Colorado just is home. Literally and just viscerally, I think there's just so much to love about the state. And when we were in New Jersey, I remember just like feeling kind of so like there's so many trees, but it was so suffocating because I was like, where is the horizon? Don't know what, I'm used to knowing which way is west. So
I know Mark Maringer is on Zoom. If you want to share your icebreakers.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. And I second that thing about knowing which way is west because I grew up here in Denver as well. So I'm a Denver native. I've got two kids who also were born here. My daughter Leia, who is turning 17, a senior in high school, and my son Maddox, who's in 8th grade and 13. And I have to mute every once in a while to cut out their commentary in the background. So because they were both teenagers, so I get to live through that for a little while, for one more year before she goes off to college. My two icebreakers. One of these is not going to be a surprise to anybody who knows me. My favorite spot in Central Park is Chipotle. I will add on to that what was it? No, I guess it's a boring fact about me. I don't know. It's one of the other categories. They used to, before they had their current rewards program a while back, have a program called an MBA or a Master Burrito Ambassador. So I have a certificate in my office or in our office here that designates me as a Master Burrito Ambassador. And I got some Chipotle collectibles and stuff like that from it. So, and then I also did the 2004 thing. I was in Washington, D.C., working in a polling firm, trying to, count down the days because we had already put down money on our house here in Central Park. And we're getting pictures every few weeks of what the latest looked like starting in June with basic framing. And, towards the end of the year was much more complete. And we moved here. My wife's from Philadelphia. We moved here in February of 2005. Sorry, I almost said 2025. So that would obviously be wrong. But I, weirdly enough, we have a strong or a weird San Diego contingent or connection through a lot of us here. I grew up going to La Jolla Beach in San Diego. We had a condo, in La Jolla that we would go to every once in a while, like whenever we had a break. And then when I moved out of as a kid from Colorado to California, we first moved to Vista in North San Diego County, before moving up to Ventura. So I lived in California for a little bit of middle school, high school, and college, and then moved to DC or Rockville, Maryland, technically, and then moved out here. So.
of folks, well, we have a few folks who couldn't join us, and 3 folks got me their icebreakers. So I'll read Brian Penny's. I don't know if you want to do that, Carol, or,
Okay, he's moved to Denver in 2000 with his job at First Data and is happy with that decision. I was living in 2000, everybody's taking the 2004. That's
it's a
interesting.
good icebreaker.
Okay. I was living in the neighborhood helping organize CPUN. Wow. With some other residents. I take great pride in what the organization has become and is doing for our neighborhood. So he's our historian, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and, Jack.
Sorry,
Can,
I'm working. I apologize.
that's okay. Can we get 2 icebreakers out of you?
You'll ask me a question. and
Okay,
answer
okay.
it.
What were you
Right
doing
behind
in
you, Dr.
2004?
What was in 2004?
Yes.
In elementary school at West Shirley Creek.
Okay.
Were you the first year, like the first class?
Yes,
That's really great.
Yes, I was. Which makes you all feel old, I'm sure.
That's okay.
Everybody here made me feel old, so
What, you got another one for me? Two.
Let's see. Yeah, if you turn around, there's the list of questions.
This meeting turned into karaoke night. What song?
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Oh, I would go running from the building. Yes, all right. We've learned something.
Is that a new song? I haven't heard.
Yeah.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
a few bars.
You Google it up there, Matt. You'll find it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We've also got Amanda responded. So she actually did answer the karaoke question,
Right.
which is Dog Days Are Over, Florence and the Machine. I don't know if anybody else knows that song. I recommend you listen to it. Yes, so it's
Exciting.
like, yes, it's very upbeat. There's lots of belty sections. So I think we should have a CPUN karaoke night and hold Amanda to that.
all right.
So, and then in 2004, that's the year she got married. So, and then Brad, his unique hobby, is that he brews beer. And I currently have a delicious pumpkin beer fermenting at home right now. Any CPUN board members are welcome to bring a growler over if they'd like some. Yes, and then, Hidden Gems, Constellation Park in the South End. And I take issue with him saying that dirty laundry is in the South End. It is not. It is in the East 29th Ave, section of the neighborhood. It is a hidden gem. So I recommend folks check it out.
It's also the subject of many a noise complaint.
I'm not
Oh.
surprised, like it's a bar. So something actually that we didn't kind of share out, although the folks who sent the folks who had sent in their icebreakers was just kind of calling out where we live in the neighborhood. So that we kind of have a sense of the geographic spread and representation in the neighborhood. So actually we can start. Kristen will go around. Okay.
It's down there on the right.
Yep.
I live in Buffalo.
Live here, Conservatory Green.
29 job.
Conservatory Green.
Park West. I think I'm Willow Park East. This is always like
What's your address?
yes, I'm just north
your
of
address?
Prairie Meadow, 5187 Central Park.
You are in Well Park,
That's what I thought. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm a Conservatory Green.
East 29.
It's in, forget what you call it.
South
Prairie
End
Park.
on the east. I'm in South End on the east side, whereas Brad is South End on the west side.
I get confused by the Willow Park East because I said it's west of Central Park Boulevard.
Yes.
So the east thing is always confused me.
Wait, where are you?
What?
I'm in Inouye House, but what is it?
East 29, that it used to be called Classic Stapleton. So it's East.
So we,
29.
that Stapleton's
So,
bad. We don't.
yeah, so anyway, so yeah, so, but it was the first, kind of
Okay.
like where the first housing. So, okay, we are actually exactly at time to start talking about RNOs 101. And we can kind of go through this, I think, relatively quickly. Just that, so for the folks who are in the room, before joining CPUN, who here had ever heard of registered neighborhood organizations? All right, so anyway, the idea of this section of the meeting is just so that we all have a good, like, basically baseline of information. So actually, they were established in 1979 through a city ordinance. If anybody wants to look it up, I can know this out, but it's chapter 12, article 3 of the Denver Revised Municipal Code. And I told you I like boring things. So anyway, and the purpose of establishing the RNOs, partly because it was a time you had from the city side, it was a time before email. And so it was solving for a problem of how do you communicate to neighborhoods. Actually, and I talk a little bit about the INC, there was also a movement in the 1970s of neighborhood organizations kind of coming from the communities because there was a lot of redevelopment and kind of urban renewal happening, and the communities or some neighborhoods wanted to organize so that they had a voice in what was happening to their communities. And so from the community, that's what's happening on the community side. You also have a communication issue happening on the city side. So this was solving for kind of both of those problems of how to communicate going both ways between the city and the people. So it was to increase access to the various agencies and departments of the city for neighborhood organizations, to improve the flow of information between these groups and the agencies of the city, and to enable such organizations to present their positions before certain decisions affecting their neighborhoods, before those decisions are made by agencies and departments of the city. And so the process is that you register with the Department of Community Planning and Development to be officially recognized by the city. And if you look at the ordinance, there's a certain kind of like, basically a fairly bare bones set of qualifications you have to meet. I think you have to meet once a year. You have to have some bylaws, you have to establish a footprint of what area you cover, and that's kind of it. And by registering, you receive notifications on rezonings, excise and licenses hearings, and kind of any other city agency communications that come through. I think that something that's interesting, I think that in talking with some of the other RNO heads in the area, like there's kind of a lot of, because it was basically the ordinance was made in 1979, and we've had kind of crazy technological and social and cultural changes since then. I think that there's a lot, there's kind of a lot that can, a lot to be desired in that model, in terms of community engagement or community organizing, which is something that we can just kind of talk about as folks report out and we have a discussion. But I think that Councilman Cashman, I think about 5 years ago, was it 2019?
I think
Carol,
that's right.
yeah.
Yes.
He was working a little bit on RNO reform, like just amending the ordinance a little bit to capture kind of new realities in the city. And he had sent out, I think he had sent out a survey, and then just generally also looking at the demographics of RNOs, or generally the makeup of RNOs are wealthier, older, and depending on the neighborhood, often whiter than the neighborhoods, the kind of census demographics of the neighborhoods. So it can create, instead of being a channel for communication, sometimes RNOs can become gatekeepers of information as opposed to channels for communication. And so I think that that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think anything has happened with RNO reform, but I know that it is something that comes up like in terms of thinking about what is actually a productive way of engaging with neighborhoods from the city side, and also like what is the most productive or effective way of trying to advocate for either regional or neighborhood interests with the city. So that's what RNOs are. It's pretty, it's pretty basic. So we are an RNO. What we are not a property owners or homeowners association. And the acronyms for those are POAs or HOAs. So in Central Park, the Master Community Association is our property owners association.
We're an RNO.
But, and
We're an
I didn't see, it's not registered, or like I looked on the map and
RNO.
it wasn't
Someone
registered.
forgot to fill out a form.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, I knew that the MCA was technically an RNO to get the notifications. So part of it is like, sometimes it's just, you need to get information, and so you can register as an RNO. We're also not a business association. Central Park Business Association represents and advocates for small business owners in our community, and we are also not a metro district. And that's a special taxing district to fund and build critical infrastructure. If you look at our annual property tax bills, you'll see how many mills go toward the metro district. And we have 2 Park Creek and Westerly Creek metropolitan districts. I'll share that's a front porch article from about 6 years ago that actually goes into the metro districts, and we also will have that as a topic in 2025, that'll actually be one of our monthly topics, is Metro Districts 101, and what they mean for us. Sure,
Nested RNOs. Like
yes. Do you mean like having
an RNO within an RNO? So MCA RNO within the footprint.
within the same,
of the same-
yes, you can have overlapping footprints. And so, yeah, as you can see, like the MCA registering as an RNO doesn't mean that it functions the same way that CPUN does. That, I mean, Jack, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the RNO designation is largely to be receiving the city communications.
I honestly think somebody from the city called us a zillion years ago and told us to register, and so we fill out the form once a year.
Okay.
And so, I think we are an RNO in name only. And apparently we're not right now because we're not on the list, so, yes, it's really, I get a zillion emails from the city every month, and most
But
of them
there's
get
no-
deleted.
you're not prohibited from having an RNO within an RNO. It's just an interesting.
Well, it's not so much having an RNO within an RNO as it is having RNOs within kind of like within the same geographic
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
I think at the meeting that we went to,
That's-
there were some that were like Cherry Creek, or they were some subset of Cherry Creek, so there was a bigger RNO.
Yeah.
They also formed one to address specific issues, probably because there was a higher concentration of residents in that smaller geographic area, but
It's just,
Yeah.
that opens my mind to so many
Yeah.
other interesting questions. I
they're
think.
not.
Yeah, well, I think
It's
that's,
such a giant neighborhood.
yeah.
Maybe it makes sense to have 2, just, I don't know
It's
what we
called
want to talk
Central
about.
Park United.
Fine.
So, no, but I mean, that's a fair point, and I think that
We told the gentleman we met from Kappa Tower that you already have an RNO, because I think we thought that you can't have, he thought he needed one. He can't-
Yes, and for Kappa Towers would be a separate RNO.
Right. and
And
we
she
said,
happened to
"No,
meet him at the meeting.
yeah.
And so and then you introduced me, and so then you explained to him that he was already part
Right,
of an RNO. And I haven't been able to, he hasn't responded back to me.
right.
But
But I
just-
do like, maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe if he
I was gonna
felt
say,
the need to have
yeah.
RNO just for his development, if there's no prevention of that, I mean, I feel bad now. I'm like, oh, I said no because you're part of this one, but would there be better representation perhaps if there
Well,
was
certainly he
smaller?
would get
It's
the
interesting.
information more directly. I mean, and that's something that we've struggled with, is that you get kind of a fire hose of information sometimes from the city without context. And I have struggled with like, how do we share this information in a meaningful way? So anyway, I'm sorry. I think that would
If
be.
you want
a good-
rezoning requests, get you on an email list.
Yeah, oh, well, that's true. Then you can also like sign up for this. So that's the thing, is this was an ordinance that was set up in 1979, but now you can sign up for newsletters for a lot of the agencies or different offices that you want to track. So there's multiple ways of getting things, but this is kind of like a long-standing traditional structure within within the city. Something that is interesting, so next month we will be kind of combining our meeting with Northeast Park Hill Coalition, and they are an RNO within a larger community that has another RNO. So there's the Greater Park Hill Community is the registered neighborhood organization for all of Park Hill. And then Northeast Park Hill Coalition formed because they, I mean, partly because they felt that their interests were actually quite different from what was being advocated from the larger RNO. And so they wanted to have a more focused, kind of more focused work in their part of the neighborhood. So yeah, we can talk about how that has is working with them also. So then just really quickly on this, Denver Interneighborhood Cooperation, or the INC, was founded in 1975. So that was before the RNO ordinance was passed. It was part of the national neighborhood movement of the 1970s that I mentioned. It was initially formed to revive and conserve older neighborhoods and to demand the right to participate in decisions affecting their neighborhoods with both public and private sector institutions. So something to know about the INC, it is membership. It's a membership-based umbrella organization of RNOs. It costs $40 a year to join. There are 2 delegate seats that we have as members of the INC. Carol is one of our delegates. If anybody is interested in participating on Saturday mornings, the second Saturday of each month from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m., they can take that second delegate's slot. Not every RNO in the city is, since it is kind of, you opt into it and you also have to pay for it. There are several RNOs that are not members of the INC. And in fact, the 2 RNOs that we're going to be kind of joining with next month are actually not members. East Colfax Neighborhood Association is not a member of the INC, nor is the Northeast Park Hill Coalition. So it's, you know, it is an umbrella, but it also is not like fully inclusive of organizations in the city. Okay, so this kind of leads us into just a report out from Kristen, Matt, and Carol, I think attended the INC's event on neighborhood organizing. Just kind of like their take on RNOs. So I don't know, did you have questions that you wanted folks to be responding to?
No, we met a while ago,
Oh,
and
okay.
so I just want to hear from them. I want everybody to hear from them.
Okay,
From us, okay.
so yeah,
Right,
if you
you and
want to
Matt.
describe
Have the
the
pa-
event, why
Do you
went-
have the document that we created?
Which doc, what, this is more, I think more,
Yeah, I
we
can
can share that
just-
with people, but more as a
Yeah.
new board member
Sure.
and as a relatively new board member, what your impressions were.
Of course. It's in the hot seat tonight. No, I think we had, I'm very visual, so I know we created this document. It had, why did we go? What did we learn? What do we, what's next? So the why did we go? I think, me personally, I did not know of RNO even existed before I started looking into becoming involved in CPUN. And I find it amazing and fascinating that so many groups of people and communities have come together and formed these, entities that can advocate for the people living in their communities and come together, solve problems together. Like I saw so much potential going there because a lot of the RNOs were talking about the same things that we talk about. One of the exercises we did was, what are the challenges that you're facing? And everybody listed them out there. And to the one, we have the same challenges that all the other RNOs have. How to get people more engaged and involved, how to communicate better with them. The concept of advocating for, what does that really mean? I learned that there's actually a form that we can submit to various entities doing things to our community, if you will, good, better, and different, where we can say, this is the position of Central Park on this particular thing that you want to do. Didn't know that. So I think there's a lot of potential to learn from other RNOs. Things like traffic and so forth, that's not unique to Central Park, but other RNOs are tackling it in unique, creative ways. I think it's great next month that we're gonna be talking to other RNOs to do more of that. I can talk a lot more, but
Go ahead.
No, to me, I think it was just an interesting chance to like hear from other volunteers and other RNOs around the city and find that they do have a lot of the same common problems. Not that that's particularly surprising, but just the approaches that they take. And I guess one of the things that I think is nice about our neighborhood, at least so far, is that, there's been a fairly high level of comedy in that, like one role of RNOs and the way I became familiar with it when I lived in Northwest Denver, we had the Highland United Neighbors Inc. Honey. And, they were very involved in neighborhood disputes, and that was an older neighborhood. Of course, I had lived further south at Umatilla and kind of right behind where Olinger's and all that is. And so there was a lot of gentrification going on in that neighborhood. And so the RNO's role was different there than it is here. So, and I think that that's one of the things that Carol and Kristen and I talked about is what is the role of CPUN and how do we as board members sort of find those common goals and things that we want to work on collaboratively.
So ditto to what you said about the challenges, that there were 2 sessions and the first, I don't know, and the first session to me was more productive because we were hearing from members from different RNOs and learning about similarities and with challenges and that kind of thing. And there was just this very personal exchange. And then the second session, and I know I have the document, was a document that essentially was read off of a screen. That was kind of the, recipes and these are the rules and this is the history and that sort of thing. It was kind of like a tutorial, I think. And so it was pretty dry. It's important. But I felt like, yeah, I could just be handed that and do that myself and share it. I do want to share it with everybody. I liked having there was this statement about a 49-year-old nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the well-being of Denver's neighborhoods through collaboration, advocacy, and community engagement. By bringing together residents, businesses, and local leaders, INC works to address issues affecting neighborhoods and build a stronger, more vibrant community for all. It's a lovely statement, but when you take it apart in these words like well-being and collaboration and advocacy and community engagement, like how do we define those terms? How are we going to define those terms? And what are the specifics of those? And what's a really productive way to engage, whether we're engaging with Central Park or we're engaging with other neighborhoods as well. And it feels overwhelming sometimes, but at least having this little paragraph in front of me is helpful to do that. So I was just delighted that both of you decided to come, and and it also made me think that this needs to be a part when we have new board members coming in about the interview process. And it's not to say, oh, sorry, you don't know anything about RNO, so we aren't going to consider you. But yeah, so, but let's talk about this because it's an integral part. We have to know about this, and it's to our benefit to know our neighbors. The ones that we can see on our bikes and the ones that we, drive a little farther to engage with.
Yeah, I think that was definitely something that came out of it is whether someone knows or not when they're wanting to learn more about possibly serving on the board, but sending them a link to that dry document, maybe there's a cooler, maybe the presentation that they did. I don't know. We could do.
I'll go back.
We could find something from the INC, I'm sure. But just like, okay, if you don't know anything about it, then here, go look at this.
Yeah.
And then come back to us, and then let's dialogue about what did you get from that? What did you meet? What did you learn? What speaks to you?
It's a good use of time, I think, just to, kind of find out what's the deal with RNOs outside of like, how does this one operate? But
Yeah.
what is the purpose and how do they operate? And there are a lot of things that I think you could take from it. I was with Carol with that second session. I felt like didn't relate as much to CPUN because, we've been in operation for 20 years. It had more to do with how to start one, but, it was a good opportunity, and I think they had free food.
They did.
Pretty good grub.
They did.
I have actually long wanted to have some sort of food option at our meetings to encourage, so sorry, guys, no food tonight. But we meet like from 6:30 to 8:30 and it, you know, just to respect like people's yeah, exactly, basic needs. So we can talk about that. I guess, so I guess I have a question for you three, but also for everybody else, like, I guess, like, what were your takeaways for CPUN from an event like that? And then I guess, do other folks who are in the room have questions just about, you know, about that event or about RNOs in general from both like this report out and preceding slides?
What am I take? Sorry,
I was gonna ask, do you know if the event will be offered again or if it comes annually?
Must be an annual thing, right, Carol?
I haven't heard of that before. I was delighted, but I didn't.
I think we should tell them.
Yeah.
In my memory, I don't think they've had an event like that actually. Oh, and
I would suggest, our delegate, our delegate, delegate, came out wrong. But maybe suggest to Di and C Carol that they do a virtual option. Or, because that's probably something they can do more frequently. They don't have to feed anybody. And if they just did the more activity-based session where
Yes.
purely just like, come with your problems. And then like, you know, okay, everybody list out all their problems in the chat or something. And then, all right, break into everybody about traffic, go over here, and everybody about engagement, go over here, and then just brainstorming and problem solving. I think that would be a cool way to meet other people.
I think it's a wise thing to do when you share common issues. And you brought up the traffic thing, whatever, that we're not the only ones that are, you know, dealing with that, but other issues as well. And so I think, I'm happy to go back to, their board and ask those questions.
And I think the RNO, the 101 could be done
Yeah.
in 5 minutes or under, like it's, yeah, they spend 45, but it really.
I tried to keep mine as short as possible. Carol, since you've attended those meetings, I'm curious about how different is a regular INC meeting from that? Because I feel like what Kristen's describing, that first session was like, it feels like that should be part of what that organization is doing, is kind of getting folks talking to each other from different parts of the city so that you're sharing information with each other, or kind of figuring out, can we work together on problem solving some of this?
I don't.
No.
I haven't seen that
Yeah.
much. It's a set agenda, like we said, an
Yeah.
agenda, but it seems to be a thematic sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then they have committees similar to ours. I'm trying to remember what the different one is, because they have DEI, they have education,
Zoning and
transportation, maybe that's it. And so they're similar, and they do a report out of their committee work. But it's very, they always have a guest speaker. But it isn't so much what you're talking about. And I'm trying to remember now what else is sort of a feature. And then, but you can go to their meetings. That's the other thing. The most consistent one is what they call transportation. We used to call Safe Streets Transportation Committee. And then we changed it because to me, it sounded like we're loading freight, rail cars. And so it was, and then we kind of redefined what Safe Streets was as opposed to health and safety. So they have a guy who's been on that committee, I think the chair, his name is Joel Noble, for a very long time. And so they consistently have meetings. And I always advise people to go to those, and they're on Zoom, because we can learn a lot, we can collaborate. And perhaps that's how we do a little collaboration, is through the committees, and attending their committee meetings. And they're always on Zoom, as well as in person now. So that,
The Saturday meetings are on Zoom?
I'm sorry?
The Saturday morning meetings are on Zoom?
The INC meetings are Zoom,
Yeah,
yes, and they have a social thing at 8:30, and then they begin the meeting at 9, and it runs from 9 to 11. It's 2 hours. And it's once a month. The committees, I don't think are that as consistent, all of the other committees are as consistent. Like I've been trying to get onto the education committee and it's not. And
As
I,
they say, they never send out notifications.
no, you've got to go, you've got to go to their, it could be better designed website to find those.
But
It's an
It's
incredibly
really
difficult
difficult to,
Yes, yeah, I think
yeah,
there are a few RNOs that actually have funding, so like Capitol Hill United Neighbors or CHUN. Actually has staff, like an executive director, and
is
Well,
Travis
they-
Liker still part of that?
don't know, he was, but I think not, cause
Oh,
the guy who's the historic Denver guy was the director of CHUN after him.
oh,
So I'm not sure. So there are some, and then Greater Park Hill Community actually they have a food bank. I think they have, and also their neighborhood newspaper, I think, is funded out of, their like grant money. So there's like some of, yes,
Raising my hand. That was a takeaway. Some RNOs have membership dues. Cherry Creek RNO has $40 annual membership dues,
like.
which is amazing.
Member or from?
So, and they have like hundreds of people show up at their meetings.
really.
Yeah,
That's another thing we could learn.
you can see that. But you could also see that in our neighborhood too. Facets that's smaller. It was just an interesting thing, like, what? You charge people and people pay it and then they come to the meetings and they're engaged, like,
So that's interesting, because that'll bring us to the next thing is actually looking at, on our agenda. The next agenda item, is looking at our mission statement and actually looking at what's in the bylaws. And so I highlighted, actually, we could just kind of move a little bit onto the bylaws. Just on the last bullet point here is that membership for CPUN is any natural person who resides or owns residential property in the CPUN geographic boundaries as defined above shall be a member of CPUN. So it's actually
Fake person.
what?
no
Gotta be a
bots.
natural person, not a fake person.
Personhood, like we have to make the distinction, but I think that it is thank you for coming, Amanda. So it is like, and actually maybe you can weigh in as kind of a longtime member of the RNO or Mark on
Timing of
Yeah.
that.
it's just kind of talking about, I think we can move into the next discussion, which is just mission statement and a little bit about the bylaws, but since you're talking about membership dues, that is, I mean, it is interesting, because I do think if somebody does invest their money in an organization, they will be more active. Like, I think that's true. I think that it's in tension with wanting to make it as inclusive as making it as inclusive as possible. And I know that having seen how rezonings or how it kind of works on the city side, if an RNO writes a letter of support or against a rezoning or some other kind of policy, it doesn't necessarily show how many folks were represented in that decision. And so I am thinking specifically, I think of Congress, I think it was Congress Park, or maybe something around there around the East Central neighborhood plan. There were people who can't be members of the RNO because they don't pay the dues. And so they don't have a right to vote on the issue that was before the RNO. And so, but then the city puts a certain amount of weight on, like, the registered neighborhood organization has spoken. And so that's where, you really get into issues of equity. And so, anyway. But I was gonna say, Amanda, if you wanted to talk at all about.
It's just never been something that we've even, that since I've been on the board, talked about doing, like being a dues charging organization. I mean, we're lucky in that we have opportunities to get donations and get sponsorships and
Yeah.
get direct giving from the MCA that I don't know that we find that we better off if we asked people to pay dues.
Somebody unmuted?
When CPUN was originally formed, or when I first went to a couple events back in the day, it was explicitly stated that I think it was like I was asked for lifetime dues of $15 and that we would, or something like that, and we would never have annual dues. I mean, obviously, we've evolved since then, but I don't really think that dues are go over well.
Did you pay your $15 lifetime dues, Mark?
I did.
I've never paid dues.
And by the way, I was not advocating that we do that. I just thought it was really interesting. It was just an example of like, wait, what? Like there, really you could do anything within your
Yeah.
bylaws or what you feel like is right for your community.
No, I mean, I think it's good to know like what the different models are around the city. So let's go back a couple, or back, so now is the time to talk about, just mission statement. And I read a much longer thing at the beginning of every meeting, but this actually is the kind of what the mission is. And so our mission is to work for the betterment of this community in the city and county of Denver by providing a forum for residents living in Central Park to discuss and resolve issues, a network of communication, a means of acting on matters of importance to the community as a whole. And so I think that something that we've kind of been working through over the past few years is, our, like, what is it? I think it's specifically around a means of acting on matters of importance. And kind of what that means and what the parameters are for that last bullet point, I think, has been something that we've, like, has come up over and over, over the past few years. And I think it also kind of touches on the idea of representation. It's just like, if we do support something or speak out or in favor or against something, like as a board, how do we know that we have community buy-in? And I think that's important, but it's funny because when you drill down to what the work each committee is doing, that is like very clearly on the advocacy side, working with RTD to try to get more trips up and down Central Park Boulevard, and to deal with traffic congestion and school parking, or safe streets. I mean, that's like what Carol and Amy work on in Safe Streets. It's very much advocating on behalf of the community. And so it's pretty obvious, like what are the primary issues that people get back to us about on some of these topics. So I feel like it's the means of acting on matters of importance isn't necessarily contentious for certain issues, and for other ones they are. So like the name change over many years was one of them. So I just wanted to open up the discussion for folks to share, is like, what speaks to you in this mission statement? Are there gaps, or are there like ways of interpreting it that we should be kind of more openly discussing? Anyone?
I'm
First
happy
thing
to
that
weigh in
jumped
on
out
that.
first.
Want to go ahead?
Heather had started before you.
Heather started and
Heather
then
started, and then we'll go to you, Mark.
Was that it's with the city and county of Denver, and I know that there's like a small part of Central Park that's in Aurora, but that RNO is a Denver specific. So
Our footprint includes the Aurora section, and we changed the bylaws actually, was it 4 years ago? I think it was December 2020.
It shouldn't have been 2020. It would have probably been like
21.
21.
You're right. So a few years ago, so we did change that. And I think actually the language probably just needs to be updated there, because the language around the footprint,
yeah,
the language around the footprint extends to include the Aurora portion. So it should be updated.
When we, so we do, I think that bringing in or expanding our footprint to include Aurora was to be inclusive in terms of who is a voting member of this organization. But I think it's important to not try to spread ourselves thinly to be the RNO for the Aurora portion, which would, have involve dual meetings where there's representation from both city governments and both police forces, and committees are split between Aurora Public Schools and Denver Public Schools. So it's to bring people in, but not to really divide our work. But it's, I mean, but it is interesting because we do get zoning notifications from Aurora that we should be sharing. I mean, kind of sharing out, and I've tried to include opportunities like in, when we do the community email, when there's something that's relevant to Aurora residents in that zip code, like I've tried to include that so that I don't know if it necessarily, it is true, all of our city representatives who are community partners are generally just the Denver ones. I am reaching out for the November meeting too. Yeah,
I'll be two streets.
yeah.
I mean, it is not a large portion. So I don't know that bringing in additional people,
222
Yeah.
properties.
No, it's more
Right.
just like,
not a whole
Yeah.
giant, I think you're muddying the water by trying to bring in Aurora residents. Because the whole purpose of when they built those is to make, like, there was this agreement, he can tell you how the whole thing went down. There was this agreement with the builders and there was this strip of land and all this stuff, right? So the builders sold it as you were living in Central Park. They forgot to tell you that your taxes were gonna be Central Park, even though it was Aurora. That's the part they forgot, which caused a lot of problems. But in general, they all believe they're Central Park. So by telling them all of a sudden they're Aurora, you're just muddying the waters.
that's funny though, because we do get comments in the community survey that are basically have said, like, you never like acknowledge that, like Aurora, like there are.
It's because the
Yeah.
builders sold it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, the builders frankly screwed them, honestly.
Yeah,
Like, to be
I
fair,
mean-
they shouldn't have sold it the way they sold it, and they did. And they all were like, oh, okay, we're part of Aurora. And then their property taxes come and it says they're part of Adams County. So they're like, oh, what? So it's just this, don't muddy the water with it. They all believe they're Central Park.
I don't know, I think that I would say if we say in the city and county of Denver, and I don't know, why adding Aurora is, like, I feel like we ran into this when we were talking about the footprint, like, I don't know why adding Aurora to the language of it, which is not necessarily something we need to spend too much time on tonight. But I guess I don't see why that's so problematic. And also there are like, when we're kind of doing neighborhood problem solving, we actually have interagency issues like around the fire around Westerly Creek and the proximity to Stanley.
Yep.
And even just like the issue of the four-way stop going like down, like we
Right.
actually do deal with Aurora.
It's because it's right down the
agencies
middle
there.
of
Exactly,
that,
yeah.
right.
So
But what I'm saying is, you're gonna bring in like Mike Kaufman to deal with these 220, I mean, that's for real, like that, to deal with these 220 houses.
That's what you're.
Right.
Not taking our focus away from.
Right.
How many other properties, Jack?
Right. Yeah, like 10,000.
That's
About 30,000-ish.
so, yeah, I think that's what you're saying. It's not,
It's an RNO for Northwest Aurora.
Oh, yeah.
So if there needed to be like municipal issues addressed, I think that would be the.
Right.
fit
I
for-
think that's largely how, I mean, anyway, this is just kind of wording an emission statement as
Yeah.
opposed to kind of the practical effects of it. I guess I do want to acknowledge though that we actually do, like, there are issues that come up like in responding to folks' emails about like just connecting them with folks in Aurora when it actually is something, because that line, the
Right.
is actually right. I mean, it's
It's literally in the middle of 26.
exactly. So yeah, so there are a number of issues that,
And similarly with Commerce City, because they're responsible for the completion of Central Park Boulevard on the northern side. So we're not just, we have to extend beyond Denver on both north and south sides, but I wouldn't want to expand the.
well, we're not expanding
Yeah,
the
the
focus
focus,
of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, other than that.
the
what other-
forum,
Like.
forum is interesting. I'm curious.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, Mark, I apologize, actually. If you wanted to weigh in also, thank you for that, Heather. But
Yeah,
Mark,
I
what
wanted
what
to-
did you want to do?
So I wanted to weigh in on your, add a little nuance, I would say, in my perspective of how the line between advocacy and communication as it pertains to the committees. I won't deny that maybe some of the committees have crossed that line at times in the past, but it was probably at times when we weren't really like paying close attention to what committees were doing. But to me, the main thing is what do we as an organization officially advocate for isn't part of our mission. But when we create a forum or a network of communication or a means of acting on matters of importance, we as individuals and other members of the community are certainly free in those discussions, forums, meetings, etc., in my view, to advocate for our own personal views without the organization itself stating an official position, without asking the broad community what, where everybody stands. That's how I would sort of draw that distinction between us as an organization advocating versus us as individuals in these meetings that we've created, because somebody could go to that meeting with the opposite view and weigh in the opposite direction from what some of us might do.
And does that not just stop things from taking place? So like, let's say you want to advocate for more RTD bus routes to a school, but you haven't asked the greater community if they really want more RTD bus routes to the school. You did send out a survey, but you only had 200 respondents. I mean, like, do you not advocate for that then?
Well, we can certainly set up a forum or a meeting or some sort of way to communicate with RTD or Denver Public Schools or something like that. And in those meetings, allow the community, or we as individuals in the community can voice our opinions. But we as an organization then would be deviating from our mission if we were to say, we advocate for this and we don't have any proof that the community agrees with us. Now, in that particular issue, is the community probably going to disagree with us? I doubt it. I don't think there's going to be an objection to that particular issue, but there's plenty of issues in the past, like if we're going to stick to the education issue, whether or not we have strict boundaries like the rest of the city for elementary school, or we stick with our choice process. The fear that I have is that if we allow people to just sort of willy-nilly or whenever we feel like it without community input, voice our opinions, we could have a board that's 2/3, 1/3 in favor of creating boundaries like the rest of the school district. And in that scenario, we might lose the other third of the board members who are upset about it. And then we've lost a third of our board. And that's the situation I'm trying to avoid, is contentious issues where we vote down the minority, because I feel like that's how a organization like this gradually loses trust, as opposed to building up trust from the community by saying, we're not going to speak for you without talking to you.
I think that just limits the scope of the things that we want to weigh in on, to the extent that if there's controversy over it, or it's a 2/3, 1/3 split, then CPUN doesn't take a position. But if we want more public transportation on Central Park Boulevard, again, like, we can deal with people who object to that, but in general, I think it's safe to say that our representative group, all being in favor of that, can speak for the neighborhood, because the 20 of us, or however many there are in 90% agreement as to what that communication should look like, or how the advocacy should take place.
As somebody who works in public opinion research, I will say that just because 19 semi-self-appointed individuals all agree does not mean we are representative of the community as a whole. And that's why I push strongly for anything where we worry that there could be pushback, we make sure that we have numbers to back it up that are defensible.
How do we make a really good point? This is Kristen. I think you make a good point. I think there might be a common ground where we try to do our best to have a good faith effort to communicate, give people a chance to weigh in. And if we have tried multiple different channels to give people different times of day to join, Zoom, in person,
emails, if it's a big thing we're trying to do, saying it could be contentious. And people choose not to get engaged. And then from all of the voices we've heard, we decide to go with, this is the direction the board is going in, even if we don't all agree with the majority of the board. Then I think, okay, that's defensible. I think that's your point. It's like, we can't just march in a direction and the community isn't behind us. That's not gonna be good for anybody. And I don't think that's what you're saying either.
No, it's not. It's saying that we
But-
go for the things that are so obvious that there's little dissent.
I think that's a good way to say it, that are so obvious, and because I've been on the Safe Streets Committee for a while, and if Amy was here, I think she would agree, we're advocating all the time with the city. And so we haven't done a separate survey, but there's a lot of evidence out there around safe biking, safe streets to school, safe routes to school. Bollards. I mean, we're trying to change some traffic patterns. And again, if you're on social media and it's an hourly update around Central Park and Martin Luther King Boulevard is to flip cars. And I don't want to be too dramatic and exaggerate too much, but there's a lot of accidents happening here.
Right.
And you can go on any number of Facebook pages to find evidence of that. So I think but I just know that that's what Amy and I are engaged in. Sometimes we're a little frustrated with some city agencies around this, but we keep at it. And that's what
So
we're doing. And that's part of the committee's role, purpose, goal. That's why we
So
exist.
I have a question on that, Carol. Once in one of our board meetings, we had a resident come to our meeting and essentially complain that the traffic was getting really bad, and his commute downtown or something like that had increased by something like 10 or 15 minutes or 50%. And if he came to your meeting and said, I want to get rid of the bike lane, would you let him come to your meeting, or how would you handle that? Would you still allow him to speak on his own behalf that way?
We're not getting rid of the bike lanes. Because part of what we're advocating for is fewer cars on the road.
But you would
So
let us
I would
speak.
object to you telling him to go away
Absolutely.
and not be able to speak for himself. That's not what we are as an organization. Telling a resident to not be able to speak at our meetings, I find
Say
offensive.
that, Mark.
Well, you told him,
Mark, I would
your response to him was, we're not getting rid of the bike lanes.
This is a hypothetical.
That to me says that you're selling to
now,
him, we're not open to what your opinion is.
I don't think
It's not an opinion-based thing. It's a situation of
It's a
What is-
realistic, go ahead.
what is happening in the community. If you get on any platform anywhere, you can see what the concerns are. There's nothing wrong with advocating for what the concerns are. Lower traffic. Can we get the schools to be better? It can be very vague. It doesn't have to be so dialed in. If people
If
want
it's
to
vague,
give
that's great. That's fine. I mean, if you're just raising it, saying people in our neighborhood have concerns about these issues, I have no problem with that.
Right, but you've said this multiple times. You basically just think that we should just be a communication pusher. In this day and age where we're at right now, we don't need that anymore. The communication is everywhere. What we need is organization to actually stand to make our community better, which comes in the form of advocacy. We got
And if you want to
communication.
change the
Communication
mission statement
everywhere.
to say that, go for it, but I will leave the board.
I actually would like to actually change it.
so, okay, I mean,
Means of acting.
okay, yeah.
So
I think that the advocacy is captured in the third one. I just want to go back to the exchange between you and Carol, Mark. First of all, you're presenting a real situation, but hypothetically in the Safe Streets Committee, and asked Carol what she would do, but whether she would let that guy speak. She actually didn't answer your question and just said, we're not getting rid of the bike lanes, but would you let the man speak at the meeting? Let's just
Great.
get
We
that
answer-
out of the way.
We answer we get a lot of emails. I don't know about other committees, but Safe Streets gets a lot. That Brian funnels to Amy and I, and sometimes Liz, and we
Yeah.
respond to those. We respond to everybody. We respect everybody. And if they show up at a meeting, they're welcome to speak. That's fine. But we also have a mission. And that part of this mission is part of the city's mission, which is to get you have fewer cars on the roads, whether we're talking about Northfield students getting to school or we're talking about people getting to their jobs. So, and there are numerous ways to do that, and that's what we're advocating for.
And I understand that, and I think that your mission is in conflict with our mission overall. I think if there were specific cases or situations where that became problematic, I would, be more concerned about it than I am.
I actually think we really should adjust it, and I would be all for adding advocacy to it.
It's part of the INC. It's what I read a little bit earlier.
Right, to our mission statement, though.
Yes.
Adding it.
A means of acting is a means of acting.
I think semantics, like I see acting and I think,
Yeah.
advocacy.
Well, something that has always stood out to me in this mission statement is that it's not verbs. Like the bullet points are not verbs, they're nouns. And so it does it leaves us like there's a certain kind of like stasis in that they're not.
Providing is the verb.
No, by providing, but all we're doing is providing. We're not doing anything other than providing
I'm telling you.
in the statement. So anyway, the other boring fact about me is I took a whole semester on grammar and it was the best English major class I ever took. But so I have always this has always stood out to me. I think that I actually am glad that we're having this conversation. I am glad we are disagreeing and talking about our disagreement. I just want to also give anybody else who hasn't really weighed in yet an opportunity to kind of join this conversation. Like Tommy, David, Jack.
I would just say, I mean, with the RNO 101, it's seeing the intent behind their creation in 1979. I think Mark probably is right in being a purist and interpreting it as being simply a conduit of information for the community, right? But I'm more inclined to see it the way Kristen does, where we can make it whatever the hell we want, right? We can redefine what we do. I think beyond, its intent of being a conduit of information, I think that there's intentional ambiguity in the language there so that you can shape it on your own. And I think there are, there's safe ways to, we call it obvious, right? We may not always speak for the entire community, but I think we have an obligation to advocate on any number of issues. So I see the board being more purposeful, more influential that way. But again, I think we need to redefine the mission statement because as it stands, Mark's got a pretty strong argument in terms of that's not the intent.
Well, the ordinance represents the city's interest, not necessarily the community. The movements historically that brought RNOs about was partly there were our neighborhood organizations forming and prior to the ordinance, and that the city also had a separate interest in communicating and formalizing its relationship with these organizations. And so just going by the ordinance, it was actually intentionally, in talking to Alex Foster in CPD about the ordinance, it was intentionally designed to be fairly open-ended for the organizations. And I do think that this is the work that we need to do as a board is kind of sort through all of this. So you have kind of a backbone or a skeleton from the ordinance, but it's not a cap on how you can conceive of what the group is. Sorry, do you have any other thoughts? I didn't want to.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I'm like, yes, we have this forum. Yes, we're gathering this information. Yes, we're communicating. And then what are we doing with it? So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with the advocacy and leaning a little bit more into the means of acting pieces.
Was their intention in only making a mission and not a vision? I guess read some of the statements in the preamble is they're visionary and then the bullets are kind of our mission. But I feel like those should be kind of two separate things and we don't have them called out as different things.
Yeah, and we can look at the bylaws. So the bylaws are available on the CPUN website if you scroll all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah, they're very.
And then it's also on the shared Google Drive under board documents for anybody to look at. I think in the time that they were put together, there's a purpose, like instead of a vision, it's just there's a purpose and a mission are defined in the bylaws. And then I guess the vision is really the language of the preamble. That's the second bullet point here. So that it's in keeping with the broader vision that inspired the creation of our neighborhood. Says, Central Park United Neighbors is guided by the principles designed to create a vibrant urban community. These principles include a spirit of cooperation amongst the diverse members of the community, a sense of responsibility for everyone's well-being, and a dedication to dialogue and constructive conversation, which is actually part of, and then more than policies and procedures, these principles allow us to stay true to the path envisioned for the development of our community, even as we adapt to the many unforeseen turns in the road. And I mean, this preamble is actually precisely why I wanted to have this meeting, so that we're not just getting talked at by community partners and guest speakers, but we are actually like discussing and having this conversation among each other. So I guess any other thoughts on the mission statement and bylaws? We are over time on that section, so we can move on, but I think this is an important conversation that we like continue to hash out.
How do we resolve it though? How do we actually get to like where we make a decision?
I mean, I think that the decision's been made because we have the mission statement we have. If somebody wants to propose changes to our bylaws, they're more than welcome to. There's two mechanisms in the bylaws for changing our bylaws, in which the mission statement is part of it. And then it goes to a vote of the community. So for now, we've all signed on to the current scenario.
I see as a new member that there's different interpretations of the language in the mission statement. And I see what you're saying, Mark, just that I see from the grammar of it. I see Mark's point, providing a means to act. We're providing a way to educate the community how to act on behalf of themselves, right? I get that. I see that. But then I see the other side of,
You're still gonna be doing that. You would advocate for, the general greater good of Central Park and making it better and continuing to live in a, prosperous place. Just pushing out information on, you should go talk to this person at the city or this person at the city isn't gonna do that.
Well, it doesn't reflect what we actually do. I think that's like, I think that when you're looking at like the purpose of a system is what it does, not like
Right.
what's stated as its
It could
intention.
be both.
So
Well, yes, we should give the means to all of these people to say, yeah, go call them yourself and do this and this and that. We also should be trying to make our community better and address the issues that are issues that people want us to address. The traffic, the schools, all the things.
One of the things I think is missing in that list, is bringing the community together. Like, I mean, there's something, but to me, like one of the purposes of CPUN should be to bring people together in lots of different ways. This is festivities and all kinds of things, but also to bring people together around issues that they care about. And I think one of the things that exists in society is groundswell. So let's say we are advocating for more bus routes and there is a groundswell. People are like, you know what, I want fewer bus routes. And all of a sudden you realize there's a groundswell where you realize that there's disagreement. And that's when you have listening sessions. That's when you create a forum for people to express themselves. But if you're, saying we want more bus lanes and nobody's objecting, you go along with it, right? It goes along with what the city wants. It goes along with what families at the school wants. You don't have a ground.
Just when there's a tight turnaround for when we need to act, and then how reasonable is it for the community to learn about an issue, weigh in on an issue, and then for us to publicly discuss alternatives and then have time to react to the city. And so because like timelines for decisions don't always incorporate that pause for the RNO to go out and get information and come back, it puts us in a situation of perhaps having to act without, you know,
Yeah.
even the groundswell phenomenon that you just discussed would take time to observe and then have the listening sessions and then synthesize the information from the listening sessions. And so if we put ourselves in a position where we're going to act first until we meet resistance, it potentially sets us up to then meet resistance from the community if we're acting in a way that hasn't been based on community input first.
Well, I would say for the most part, the issues, like the specific issues that we're talking about that the committees are working on are things that are actually coming from members of the community. So like the issues,
Yeah.
I mean, and we get these all the time. Like I get lots of emails about this. I think that like just being part of our school communities also, I mean, it's not just people emailing us. We live here and are part of different groups in addition to Central Park United Neighbors. So I would say that at least that like the kind of actions that the committees are currently taking are in good faith, like taken from the feedback that they're receiving from residents.
Well,
And I
nothing
think-
has ever happened fast. I mean, how long have we
How
been
long?
advocating for, you know, a better
New
traffic
stoplight design,
sign
and-
at Central
yeah.
Park and Northfield Boulevard? I mean, how many accidents have there been and nothing is happening? I mean, I just don't feel like the city, when we are advocating for the city to do something, the city doesn't act fast.
I was gonna say, when there's a tight turnaround, it's usually because they're just contacting us to check a box. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's not about the city actually wanting to know what we actually think. And I think that that is like something that we can kind of, I would be interested in advocating around like how to avoid those situations. But, and it's not just the city, it's the developers on the zoning and planning. Like that, it's just checking a box. And I think that we are like, as a neighborhood organization, we are in a good position to recognize when that's happening and figure out like, okay, what do we do about this, like as a community? So I think that this discussion has kind of led into the next one, which is like, well, what do we want to do? That's, yeah, so there's just like the state of the neighborhood and action planning. And I just had a number of discussion prompts, just as a time check, it's 8:08. I wanted us at 8:25 to kind of stop the discussion so that we could just do a look ahead for the next, because we have a number of events and meetings coming up. But if folks just want to look at the discussion prompts, we can just take a minute, look at them and we can, you know, under the top 3 issues facing us as a community. I have some thoughts that have nothing to do with traffic or education, that are part of that. So anyway, let's just take a moment, look at the discussion prompts, think about what we want to, you know, do in this last portion of the meeting. Or just share what your committee you're on is doing about some of these issues.
Challenge, but also great opportunity is all of the different apartment communities that are coming online soon. And how that's just going to change the feel of the neighborhood. It obviously has a lot of challenges, traffic and all of that, but just how do we make them feel welcome? They being renters into the community. That's part of our, I think it is, right? No, it isn't. It is, this, was it?
The RK Mechanical is
The natural person,
or, oh yeah, no, renters, so
That's-
it's renters, so it's, you have to live or own property.
live or own, got it.
Yeah, so renters and owners.
Means like a human
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than a business.
Yeah, I was just going back to that line in my head of that one.
Years ago, and
But you know, how do we, is it flyers on their board in the foyer? I don't know what it is, but like how do we, how do we make renters feel engaged? Cause I just feel like it's gonna be like, I don't know.
There are existing apartment communities and we haven't had much success in that. And even board members that we've had that have been from renting communities have moved out at like a more rapid rate. I think it's just, the turnover, is just at a pace that makes it harder to, you know, commit to the 2 terms of a board. I mean, by all means, yes, we should get out and flyer. It's just that it hasn't been successful, but we should keep trying.
Yeah.
I looked at good data that we have regarding, we're able to separate between an owner and a renter pretty easily because owner, there's a deed that proves you own versus you send me your lease. We see on average that the turnover of a leased unit, a residential leased unit occurs every 18 months. So we are constantly seeing the renting populated. It is very, 18 months is not a lot of time. I bet I could figure it out, but it will take me some parsing of data to give you something.
It's somewhere about 30%, if I had to guess.
Again, that is, I would
But I
have
would
to
guess
get back
that's
to you. I
going
can't
to
say.
go down with the increased apartments coming online. Maybe so. In general,
I mean,
people would rather buy, but it depends on what they're all offering, right? If they offer cheap rent, they're gonna stay longer.
Well,
I also will say that is inclusive of someone renting both in a multi-family development and in a single family development. There is not a reliable way to parse. We could do it by address, but that.
It doesn't matter, frankly. It's just owning versus renting.
Mark, are you trying to?
So, yeah. So one thing we used to do that I think helped with us being able to broaden our connection with that community, with the renting community and with the community in general, is we used to do block party day. And that helped because it was a very visible introduction to us as existing as an organization. I think a lot of people found out about it through word of mouth, social media, and the front porch. And as I've voiced in the past, I think it's to me building up that means of communication with the community is achieved by building up, not to be too nerdy, but social capital within the community. And Block Party Day is a very deliberate way of doing that. So I would urge us again to bring that back.
Yeah, I would say all of this is why I am interested in being a part of a neighborhood organization. It's actually not to communicate better with the city. That's not my area of interest. My area of interest is building community, having festivals, getting your neighbors out and about. I mean, my husband and I moved a lot when, grad school and getting jobs. And when we lived on, I think it was in Long Island, they had these business sponsored casket races. So around Halloween, everyone would build a casket, like a soapbox. And I used to do this actually in our neighborhood when we first moved here. But the businesses would sponsor them. They would have prizes for the best decorated caskets, race them down the street. And it would just brought all the neighbors and all the kids out. And it was a cool Halloween type thing to do.
I would say Halloween is kind of the block party, like substitute
Fabulous.
in our neighborhoods. I mean, even if it's not formally like a CPUN thing, it really is I think the day, it is a huge thing in the neighborhood.
But there's gotta be some parenting linger. It's I know I love Halloween, don't get me wrong, but going house to house is a momentary thing. It needs to be neighbors come together and get to know each other. MCA does a lot that's good, but I feel like it almost needs a more hometowny type feeling to it. I don't know. So we did do the Harvest Festival last year, which I thought, we just expected it to be bigger every year, and it's happening this year, but I'm not quite sure about it. We did the you know, the art of the powwow, which is more educational, but it was super
Oh,
amazing.
gosh.
Yeah, it was very.
And it was really well attended, and I felt like if we, like, once we got that under our belt and we knew how to run it, we could make that a thing every year that would draw in kids from all the different schools. I mean, things that would really bring people out to something that they're learning or celebrating or, you know, like we had Chikabe with the food, which was amazing. I mean, to me, that's what I'm interested in doing more of. It also just takes a lot of organization and planning, and so it has to be more like agreed upon by everybody. I feel like it has to kind of be hosted by CPUN broadly, or, but that's only my niche, like, interest in the.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, under like the issues facing us as a community, I do think just having a sense of ourselves as a community with 30,000 people. I mean, I say this a lot, that that's about as big as my hometown. I mean, it's just like, so.
Close to 46,000.
Oh, net 46. Oh, then it really is as big as my hometown. So like, it's, I think that that's something that we as an organization, I mean, just need to do some deeper thinking about, like, what does it look like to, I know, Mark, you've suggested many times, like, bringing back the block captain, kind of structure. And I know, Amanda, you mentioned you were a block or you mentioned you were a block captain and that's how you got involved with CPUN. So it's like, what did that look like and how do you do that at the scale that we currently have? Or what does it look like for a community that's this big? What does it mean to be united? Like when we're 12 different neighborhoods and north of I-70, you know, one's a grocery store and south of I-70 has 5. Like, it's like, so.
That's why I threw it out in the beginning. I was wondering when the moment would be. I mean, when are we too big? Like, is it serving our community to have one RNO for 46,000 people? Like, that is enormous. And I know I'm new. I don't know anything, but
It's
like,
very interesting because it's hard to get participation even like, like it's hard to get participation.
but if
like,
it was more
so-
closer to your world, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't care as much about what happens up in Northfield, the drag races, all that. I feel for y'all, but it doesn't affect me at all. So
And I'll say that participation comes when individuals have something they care about. So we have 87 subordinate homeowners associations, right? So, you know, you think it's rough living with one HOA. Imagine someone that's got boo. Actually, there are 12 suckers who have 3 HOAs. And they, you know, I have found in my engagement with our subordinate associations, there is a high level of participation. That's because there are 96 of you that are all live by each other and are all highly engaged.
Exactly.
There's a lot of engagement there and there's a lot of whining.
well,
But they
some
can
of that
also
though is the
probably
fact that
agree.
they're paying somebody else, and so they're highly tuned in to making sure
Correct.
that what you're doing is right.
I agree. What I'm saying is that we have those concentrations of people already, so we don't need to reinvent engagement. We just need to better access the places that are already having high engagement. I mean, people don't come to these meetings because everything's big and high. Maybe we need to go to their meetings where everybody is coming.
So that
I
actually.
mean, you don't know, I go to a lot of meetings.
Do you have a list of the like sub HOA meetings and?
Meetings?
other-
No, I barely have a list of all the organizations. But
A lot of them are run, but they all are allowed to do separate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I was curious, because actually when I met with the director of the Sand Creek Greenway, actually, she had mentioned that they did some very targeted outreach to the income restricted like for rent buildings in the neighborhood. And that involved, they have residence councils. And that just actually involves them just showing up for the resident council meeting and just sitting in and not asking for a space on the agenda, but really just to listen and get a sense of the dynamics within those buildings and to see like where there were points of alignment, ways that, and that I thought that was a really great model for how to do outreach. And so I think I've talked with you, David, about it. And so she is getting me some information on when those meetings take place. If anybody has the time and capacity to actually be in those spaces, I think that actually is a really good model for it. As far as the apartments that are like coming online, that's where like a flyer and like sign up for like, sign, like, here's a QR code, sign up for our email list and stay in touch or something like that. But when we were doing board recruitment, I was reaching out to people I knew who were renters. And all of them said, I can't join the board because I'm actually looking for cheaper rent and we'll be moving out of the neighborhood soon. So like that is like a big, like there's a lot of turnover there.
There is. I think a lot of it, you would have to reach out to the property managers and the property managers would have to be, I can tell you a lot of the property managers, he probably can't do, are a hot mess. Like they barely can figure out what they're doing. So it's a
We're
matter
in active litigation with 4 of them.
yes, yeah. If you go, at least they called you back. Like,
Oh, no, I served them with a summons to appear in court and then they wanted to
Yeah.
talk to me really quick.
work too. It's the property managers ultimately are the ones that are in control of them, right? And so if you have a good one that wants, their building to be active, then they're gonna be great. But it's really like hit or miss on if you get that. So
Yeah, I mean, like, but this is the thing that will draw people out is events. I know this sounds so corny, but when Kaylee and I lived in Arizona, they had our property manager did a pumpkin carving contest every year, and all of the residents would come together with our pumpkins, and they would get a prize.
Yeah.
I mean, a casket race is something that like is interesting enough that it would draw people from all over, right? I don't know. I'm just trying to throw things out there. Like, I feel like that's how you get people to know about CPUN. That's how you get them to know that there's an organization that does stuff in the neighborhood and be interested in it because it's fun.
I like the question mark.
God forbid it be fun. I don't want to lose sight of what you've brought up here. And I'm gonna make a note and say caskets and I'll know what, I'm referring to. But I think this is really important to somehow incorporate that into this discussion with these questions. Because I'm on it and I would work on it in different ways to engage, because maybe that might help us solve some of these other things that are seem a little bit more technical or impersonal in some ways. But I mean, if you care about your neighbors, what might you do differently that's been a bugging the hell out of me? Okay, and can maybe I speak with you in a different way now because about certain issues and we find some commonality. So I don't want to lose sight of what you brought up here and integrate it with this. And you've given some specific ideas about events, so that's a good thing. And I'm sure we can all think about.
What about making the power?
It is. I mean,
It was a big financial lift, like.
It was.
Like, it was fully fundraised, like, to support it. I think it was about a $10,000 event.
oh no,
but-
no,
or
it was
more
it
than
was
that.
4,000.
No, I thought it was more.
Well, let's not argue that. Okay, let's just.
Yeah,
Sorry, you're right.
yeah,
It
it was,
was,
but
it wasn't that, it was more than that, but anyway.
no, it was 4,000.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, where do we want to be? It's 8:24.
but I mean, yes, so Rose Red Elk, who put it on and like organizes it, is completely willing to come back and do it again.
So the answer is probably yes.
She actually recommended we charge for tickets, and I didn't want to because I wanted it to be an educational event that was accessible to everyone. And she said, but people will value it more if they pay. And so she encouraged us actually to sell tickets. So it wouldn't have to be such a financial lift. There might have to be some costs. So what?
Suggested donation.
Yes, or, well, even if we sold $10 tickets to adults and $5 to kids, or
Kids are free, adults.
20.
Ticket,
Yeah, I mean, if we could do whatever. I could ask her, because she does these events everywhere, we could ask her what the standard.
And maybe we could build in a participation aspect. Not casket races, but something similar
Yeah.
to get
But I think
pumpkin carving.
Yeah, no, I think that, I think that that event is good, but I think that it also is not. It has, I think that it's actually not getting at what we're talking about in terms of like the block party. But like that the idea of like, we have sub neighborhoods and micro neighborhoods and like getting engagement like through like actually smaller, just kind of smaller neighbor to neighbor connections. Cause I do think like when we talk about like community health and safety is one of, you know, one of our committees. Well, you need a community, like, to be part of that. And I don't know, like, I actually don't know how connected people feel to each other. And I think that having, I mean, the Art of the Powwow event is, like, we can have events like that, but that's not actually the kind of thing you're talking about.
I think it's one of several types of events. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
parades, like a Halloween parade where everybody dresses up and comes out of the house and we just march down the
Well,
street
there's the
together.
4th of July parade that's like.
Yeah.
happens
Around
in
M15,
Conservatory.
if anyone wants to come.
Love
For
market,
yeah.
market parks do little Halloween parades in their
Yeah.
little regions,
Yeah.
but there's not like a central community.
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
Everybody
Well,
goes,
that's what
that
we're
would
talking
charge.
about, right? Just having people do things
Yeah.
amongst their neighbors, not.
Like encouraging that block
Yeah.
little.
The connections.
Right.
But if CPUN was, 'cause I don't think CPUN's involved, but if CPUN was somehow involved in like, not totally involved, but like advertising, there's gonna be a Halloween parade around whatever pocket park, there's
Well,
gonna
here's a
be
Google map, but you're like.
yeah, put your,
Halloween parade.
yes, exactly, that kind of thing. It just is like, I don't know.
Yes.
Block captains used to organize the community parades around pocket parks, and we would direct people to block captains to learn about when their parade was at their local block level park. But the block captain network sort of disbanded maybe about 10 years ago.
I think the equivalent might be Facebook admin.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean-
so that's the thing, that's what kind of stepped in, but there is less of an in-person component to Facebook groups than there was with the block.
I don't know that CPUN can solve all of this though.
No.
We're going super deep on this and I really kind of want to get back to like, what are we here for, right? I mean, a lot of this is people will handle this on their own, right? The neighborhoods will handle it on their own. We can encourage it. And I think we absolutely should encourage it, but we can't solve it. Like the neighborhoods have to do it themselves, right? And they do, actually. I actually think that this neighborhood, and I hear a lot of it because I put people in houses all over the place, right? A lot of these neighborhoods are very connected, very connected. I mean, and I think that gets lost a lot, that people think that we're disconnected. There's a lot of people who are very connected to their neighborhoods and stay because of that. You know, so while there is a lot of Facebook pages, you know, the community watch and stuff, that there's a lot of fear. And I think us representing
Gangs, they're taking over.
and trying to, you know, like help resolve some of that is really kind of the purpose of this group.
Let's do
It isn't to solve the social issues because we can't do that. Like, let's be frank, we can't. Like people have to do that on their own. You can't make a neighbor walk out and talk to her. Like you want to, and I want to too, but I mean, there's a little bit of personal, you gotta do this yourself.
But you can bring them together.
You absolutely should be able to encourage it, but I'm just saying we can't solve it. But there's other things that we can advocate to help keep people feel safe and want to stay in Central Park and be part of the neighborhood and all that stuff. And I would really like to get back to that part.
But I mean, the truth is, in the most connected communities, like when somebody has shared a slice of apple pie at the local apple pie contest, they're much more willing to share conversation.
100%.
Right,
But I
so,
think
I
that's
mean-
already happening. A lot of that's already happening. A lot of that happens with the MCA stuff, frankly. When people move in here, they constantly are asking like, well, what goes on? And I was like, get on the MCA website and the pools and all of the, you know, the 4th of July breakfast and all that stuff. That a lot of that happens already. Like there's a lot of connected neighborhoods here. A lot of them. The pocket parks are really what do it, frankly. There's a lot of connection around the pocket parks.
I think it's school events too.
School too, yeah,
It does a
right.
lot of events that I think really bring a lot of.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is 8:30 now. So I feel like I guess like, where do we want to kind of leave this conversation?
Are we leaving it or acting on it?
Or I
Acting would be great.
question.
I like the idea of pie. I think we leave it with figuring out how to do more pie.
I actually like it's in my head, I've kind of just resigned it to be, it's an and not an or. So a lot of these discussion points, like, do we have to pick one or the other? Can it be a little bit more organic, a little bit more gray?
One thing I am advocating for is the committees, knowing one another's business and working together, which has started to happen with education and safe streets and sustainability, right? And I just think that it doesn't mean we have to attend all the meetings, but a way for us to communicate about that and attend the meeting if you're interested in that. But how can education help sustainability, and, this integration can exist, and it just makes, I think, we just improve, whatever it is we're doing here. And knowing one another's business in this positive way is a good thing.
Can I ask how many people in this like meeting read the community email that goes out every 2 weeks? Okay, so that's a decent number, because what I was going to ask is actually that, because we have the report outs during our meetings, except not in this one. But I do want to include, like, not just like the next meeting of Safe Streets is blah, 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 but actually a report out on
Yeah.
Safe Streets met on October 2nd, and this is what we discussed. Here's what we're gonna be meeting with Maggie from Gotti to talk about X, Y, and Z. You want to get involved, like, here's our next meeting, like, so that there's more of a report out there, so that we actually can, like, just be aware in real time, more real time
Yeah.
than just these monthly meetings of what everybody's working on. Because I will say, like, people are working on lots of things, like, in each of the committees, and I think that we kind of lose sight of that in, like, in some ways, partly from the structure of these meetings, partly from just the way that we're communicating. But I think that this is not the, I guess, not the end of this discussion, but I'm glad that we could, like, at least kind of air, like, kind of give some oxygen to some of these topics, and we can come back to them. I don't want to take up too much more time for folks, because it is, this is a long, 2 hours is a really long meeting. So let's just go through the, like, look ahead and wrap up, and we can also just kind of follow up on some action items by I think, discussing over email as well. But the next meeting of the DEI committee is the book club discussion on Just Action. We're reading part 3, so that's Tuesday, September 24th, from 6 to 7:30. It was 6 to 7, but the conversation kind of would get cut off at 7, just as it was just as it was kind of heating up. So it's just extending half an hour. Sustainability, we have the Harvest Fest is coming up a week from Saturday from 9 to 1. We need folks to donate produce. We actually, I think, Mark, you can let us know, but we have a good number of volunteers to help sort and collect and weigh produce. But actually, if folks know gardeners or have their own gardens, that is actually something that I think we
Can we
want to
post
get the
it
word out about.
in
It is,
gardeners? Facebook?
yeah, so the MCA has shared it with the different gardeners, but is there a Facebook group
Yeah.
that's for?
Yeah.
Can you send that to me? That is exactly where we want to be putting that. Let's see, so then, Safe Streets, their meeting is Wednesday, October 2nd, rather, from 3 to 4 PM on Zoom. Our next month's meeting will be, the joint meeting of the other RNOs that meet on the 3rd Tuesday. We weren't able to get the 29th Ave space, so it'll be at, Zion Senior Center, which is, I think it's 33rd, and Fairfax, in Northeast Park Hill. That's where the Northeast Park Hill group meets, regularly. And so the agenda for that, getting to know each other's neighborhoods and our issues. Well, actually, the guest speaker for that is, Manish Kumar, who's the new director of community planning and development. It'll be a presentation, from him and a Q&A with community members. So please come out to that. If anybody needs rides, we can coordinate some carpooling. Then November 19th, we're doing the legislative look ahead, for our state, reps and senators. Rep Bacon has confirmed, and I'm reaching out to our other, kind of legislators, to also kind of talk about the 2025 session and what they'll be working on. It'll be here 6:30 to 8:30, and we have no meeting in December. So that's
Thank
it for
you.
tonight.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. And I'll stop.